This happened to me in 2018. My name is Claire, and that August I had just signed the lease on a small townhouse on Grove Street in Barrie, Ontario. My marriage had ended that spring, and I was living alone for the first time in almost a decade. The townhouse was narrow and a little dated, with a gravel path leading to the front step and a porch light that buzzed if you left it on too long. My sister told me I needed a security camera before I moved in, and I laughed her off. Then I spent my first night there listening to every creak in an unfamiliar house. And the next morning, I ordered a video doorbell online. It arrived 4 days later. I remember sitting on the floor of my new living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes, following the setup instructions on my phone while a delivery truck rumbled past outside. Installing it felt like a small victory. For the first time since my marriage ended, I had done something for myself that made me feel a little more secure. The app was simple. It sent a notification to my phone every time the camera detected motion, along with a short clip I could watch later. For the first week, those notifications were exactly what I expected. The mail carrier, a squirrel crossing the lawn, my neighbor's dog wandering toward my mailbox while she called it back from the sidewalk. Then, on a Tuesday night in early September, I got a notification at 2:14 in the morning. I almost ignored it. I was half asleep and the screen brightness hurt my eyes, but something made me open the clip anyway. The video showed my front step, lit faintly by the porch light. Nothing was there. No person, no animal, nothing moving that I could see. Just 4 seconds of an empty step before the recording ended. I told myself it was a bug in the software. Cameras get triggered by insects, wind, leaves, things you never even notice. I went back to sleep and did not think much more about it. My days settled into a rhythm after that. I worked at an insurance office downtown. In the evenings, I called my mother in Nova Scotia, usually while sitting on my new couch with a cup of tea, telling her about the townhouse and how strange it felt to buy things for a home that belonged only to me. I spent a lot of that first month making the place feel lived in. I bought a second-hand green armchair and put it beside the front window. I chose curtains I actually liked instead of ones somebody else had picked. Little by little, the townhouse stopped feeling temporary. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was building something again. The second strange notification came almost 2 weeks later. Another motion alert, this time at 11:52 at night. The clip showed the lower corner of a shadow passing across the edge of the frame, moving from the direction of the driveway toward the side of the townhouse. Then it was gone. I watched the clip 3 times. It could have been an animal. It could have been a shadow from a passing car. It could have been nothing. A few mornings later, I mentioned it to my next-door neighbor, a retired school teacher named Diane, while we were both bringing in our recycling bins. Diane asked, "You've noticed things at night too?" Something about the way she said it made me stop. I asked, "What do you mean?" Diane said, "Every once in a while I feel like somebody has walked past my side window. By the time I look, there's nobody there." I asked how often it happened. She shrugged. Diane said, "Not often, just enough that I started noticing." I did not sleep particularly well after that conversation. Through October, the notifications kept coming. Never often enough to feel constant. Never far enough apart to feel completely accidental either. A late-night motion alert here. An early morning one there. Most clips showed almost nothing. A flash of movement at the edge of the frame, a shadow near the side path. Once, something passed so close to the edge of the camera that all I saw was a dark blur for less than a second. I started checking the footage more carefully. One Sunday, I came home from grocery pickup and found a small package of curtain rods sitting on my front step. I had already received a notification when the delivery had been made. In that clip, the package sat squarely in the middle of the mat, but when I got home, it was nearly a foot to the left and turned at an angle. I stood there looking at it. There could have been a simple explanation. Maybe the wind moved it. Maybe the delivery person returned and adjusted it. Maybe a neighbor had shifted it while passing. But the camera had not recorded anyone approaching the door after the delivery. I called the company that made the doorbell because I thought I might have something configured incorrectly. The support agent walked me through the sensitivity settings and the way short recordings were saved. Near the end of the call, she explained that I only had basic clip storage turned on. Older recordings would eventually disappear unless I enabled longer storage. I turned the longer archive on that evening. I did not think much about the decision at the time. A few days later, I ran into another neighbor named Paul, who lived 2 doors down and worked irregular shifts at the hospital. We were talking near the sidewalk when he mentioned that his own camera had recorded somebody walking along the shared path behind our row of townhouses late one night. He said the person had slowed near the fence behind my yard before continuing. I asked if he still had the clip. He sent it to me that evening. The quality was poor. The figure was too far away to identify. I could not honestly say whether it was the same person connected to my own alerts. What bothered me was the route. The person came slowly along the shared path. When they reached the section behind my townhouse, they stopped for several seconds near the fence. Then they continued. It was late November when everything started to change. We had an early snowfall, the kind that made the neighborhood almost completely quiet before the streets were cleared. I walked around the side of the townhouse to check the utility meter. That was when I saw the footprints. They were beneath my bedroom window, not passing along the side of the house, not continuing toward the back gate. They approached the window, stopped, then turned away. I stood there staring at them. Whoever had made them had been close enough to look directly through the narrow opening between my curtains. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and began going through every clip that had been saved since I turned on the longer archive. I watched them one at a time. The first few seemed unrelated. Then I noticed something: rain. In one clip, rain was running down the camera lens. In another, the walkway was wet and shining beneath the porch light. Another strange alert had happened during a steady evening shower. I kept going. Again and again, most of the unexplained clips had happened while it was raining, or shortly after rain. I started writing the dates down. By the time I finished, I had a page full of them. I could not prove the weather meant anything. But I began wondering whether it was deliberate. Rain covered small sounds. It made movement harder to see through windows. On the camera, everything at night became blurred gray shapes. Then I noticed something else. Several of the dates looked familiar. The following afternoon, I contacted the local station. An officer came to the townhouse and sat with me while we went through the clips. He asked where I had been on each of the nights that bothered me most. I pulled out the paper calendar I kept near the kitchen. We started comparing dates. That was when I saw the second pattern. On several of those evenings, I had worked late. On others, I had gone shopping after work or visited my sister. More often than I liked, the strange alerts happened on evenings when I was away from the townhouse longer than usual. The officer did not tell me what that meant. He simply asked me to continue keeping records and told me the information was worth documenting. That was enough. I understood what he was thinking because I was thinking the same thing. Somebody might have been learning when I came home. The local station kept the information on file. There were additional patrols along Grove Street for a while. Diane started leaving her porch light on later. I bought a second camera for the back of the townhouse. I asked my landlord to install a motion light above the side gate, and he agreed after I explained what had been happening. I changed small things about my routine too. I stopped mentioning my plans casually. I parked my car where it blocked part of the view toward the side path. I stopped leaving the bedroom curtains even slightly open. None of those changes were dramatic, but together they changed the way the townhouse felt. For the first time since moving in, I stopped thinking of it simply as my home. I started thinking about what somebody outside could see. The worst night came in early December. I had gone to bed early after a long week. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed against the nightstand. I opened my eyes and saw a motion notification. The live feed began loading. My front step appeared. The porch light was on. At first, I saw nothing. Then somebody stepped forward from the darkness. A person. They stopped just outside the brightest part of the porch light. I sat up. My hand started shaking. The person remained there for several seconds. Then they stepped closer. They were wearing a dark winter coat. Their face was turned slightly away from the camera. They did not knock. They did not ring the doorbell. They simply stood directly in front of my door. Then one hand moved down. A second later, I heard something downstairs, a small movement from the front door, the handle. I watched the person on my phone. Their hand moved again. The front door handle shifted a second time. I called the local station immediately. I kept my voice low while I told the dispatcher somebody was standing outside my townhouse and had just tried the door. I did not take my eyes off the live feed. The person remained there for several more seconds. Then they slowly stepped backward. They turned toward the side of the townhouse instead of walking directly toward the street, and disappeared from the camera. By the time an officer reached Grove Street, nobody was outside. I stayed inside until he came to the door. The officer checked the front of the townhouse, then walked around the side. Near the gate, partly covered by fresh snow, he found a dark green glove. It was worn around the fingertips. He collected it with the other information from the property. I never learned whether it led anywhere. The officer came inside afterward and sat with me at the kitchen table. He asked whether I had noticed the same vehicle parked nearby repeatedly, whether there was anyone from my old life who might have a reason to know where I lived, an old coworker, someone connected to my former husband, anybody who had ever made me uncomfortable. I thought carefully. Nobody came to mind. The officer wrote everything down. Then he told me they would keep the information on file, continue checking the area, and contact me if anything connected with other reports. It was not the answer I wanted, but there was no name to give him, no clear face, no license plate. After that night, the visits stopped. Days passed, then weeks. No unexplained notifications, no shadows at the edge of the frame, no footprints beneath the bedroom window. For a while, I still checked the cameras constantly. Then gradually I checked less. By January, I had started sleeping through the night again. I stopped reaching for my phone every time the house made a sound. Life, in its quiet way, started to feel normal. Then one evening in late January, I was cleaning old photographs and videos from my phone when I found something I had forgotten about. The first clip the doorbell had recorded on the afternoon I installed it. I remembered the moment vaguely. After I finished setting everything up, I had carried the empty box and packaging outside. The camera detected me moving across the porch and saved a short test clip. I opened it mostly out of curiosity. There I was, walking out with the packaging. My car was parked in the driveway. The townhouse still looked barely lived in. No decorations, boxes visible through the front window. I almost deleted the clip. Then something across the street caught my attention. I watched again. Across Grove Street, partly hidden beside a parked van I did not recognize, somebody was standing on the sidewalk. They were not walking. They were facing my townhouse. I replayed the clip. The person remained almost completely still for the entire recording, watching. I sat there with my phone in my hand trying to remember that afternoon. I had been living in the townhouse for 4 days. The camera had only just been installed. I had not received the first 2:14 morning notification yet. Diane had not told me about movement outside her window. Paul had not shown me his recording. There had been no footprints beneath my bedroom, no late-night figure at my front door, nothing. And yet somebody had already been standing across the street watching my home. I took the clip to the officer who had been handling the reports. There was not enough detail to identify the person. The parked vehicle was partly outside the frame, and there was no useful plate visible. I never found out who that person was. I never found out why they were watching me, or why the visit stopped after the night someone tried my door. But I learned one thing from that old recording. The first strange notification was not the beginning. 4 days after I moved into a town where I thought nobody knew me, someone was already standing across the street watching my house. I still think about that whenever I move somewhere new. Before I unpack a single box, I look across the street.